Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. As you might notice, tonight I am joined once again by Lawspeaker Allen Turnage. This is the third monthly installment of Adulting with Allen, and Allen is going to learn us some stuff.
Maybe.
First, or attempt to learn us some stuff. So, thank you to Witten Swan for covering for that last hour last week as I went to the airport. All of our Witten, except for the lovely Brandy Fassett, were able to make it to Ostara at Thorshof, and it was a fantastic event. I'd like to thank all of the local leadership at Thorshof, as well as all of our members who gave of themselves in their time, their effort, in auction items, in auction purchases, in support of us, of Thorshof itself, and of the mission that we are working so hard together to accomplish. It was a fantastic event, and I'm very, very glad I was able to be in attendance. I suppose next up, and it's sneaking up faster than I would have thunk it, is Midsummer at Odenshof. Midsummer is going to be, let's see if Nick's got the graphic set up. I don't know that he does, but it's going to be the fourth weekend in June. That is Odenshof in Brownsville, California. Here we go, June 27th through the 29th. Again, that's in Brownsville, California. It is the first half of the Asatru Folk Assembly. We acquired Odenshof 10 years. At the end of Midsummer, we will have first seen it 10 years ago. And in October, we will have had it for an Asatru Hof for 10 years, which is quite an accomplishment in this day and age. So come out, help us celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Asatru Folk Assembly at the AFA's very first Hof. We'd love to see you guys there. It's always a very nice event. We love to show off Odenshof, and it's going to be pretty special. So we'd love to have you there with us. If you are a member, awesome. Reach out to your local folk builder. They'll get you all set up. If you're not a member, also awesome. We would love to see you fix that, and we'd love to see you come to the event. Again, reach out to any member of AFA leadership, and they will get you all set up. Or ask any questions here, and we got folks here that'll help you out. We had members invited from this broadcast that showed up at Thorshof for Ostara. So it's not just idle words. This actually gets some of you guys to come out and be part of our AFA family. And again, you don't get what you don't ask for. So if you're listening to this broadcast, either if you're listening or if you're watching it as a video, if you are a heterosexual white person and you would like to come home to the gods of your folk, we invite you to join us. Check us out at runestone.org. There's a join link there. Well, we're doing amazing things, and we would love to have you be part of the team. So please consider that. Also, share, subscribe, comment, anything you do that boosts the algorithms, that helps us out. Biggest hurdle, or the biggest, I guess, obstacle in getting as many members as should be in the Asatru Folk Assembly, which is all of our folk, is a lack of people knowing we exist. The more people know we exist, the more people join. So spread the word. We appreciate you guys. If you know anybody out there that you think would be entertained by this program, be educated by this program, or find spiritual value in it, send them our way. We would love to have them be part of our audience. That said, our audience, so much of the show is a question-driven program. So Alan's got some things to present to us tonight. There's some things I'd like to speak on, and then we are very happy to answer any and all questions you guys might have. So if you got those questions, please go ahead and send them in. And you can send in questions at any time at vns.runestone.org. Also, I want to start the show off thanking G.W. Farnsworth, who donated $100 to help a family keep a roof over their heads, which is one of our folk services endeavors right now. And also $30 to this very program. And he also bought a couple of flags. So thank you very much for that.
Yes.
We appreciate your generosity, your consistent generosity on the program. Thank you. So, Alan, a lot of people may not initially think that moderation is something we focus a lot of attention on. So take it away. Tell us why we should.
Well, many reasons first of all, that's a lot of the way that I've tried to guide my own life. And actually, I've thought about all the iterations of that in thinking about today's topic for myself. Certainly, I think the religious aspect focuses directly on, first of all, some of the things from the Lord. Most of the things, most often when people think about the term moderation, they think about alcohol and, being able to drink a little, but not a lot. There's golden milk in this Auburn mug, but to each his or her own. But as the Lord admonishes us, the heron of forgetfulness hovers over Philar's hall, and ale is not the friend of man. And certainly a little wine is okay, a lot is not. And so in the broader picture, then, I've often considered that in guiding our folk and in guiding myself, that this religion and any way would be easier if it could be extreme. I mean, if we could just say, you shall not drink at all, that would be easy. Or do what you want. That's easy too. But the hard part is hewing that line down the middle and walking that middle path. So in a lot of ways, I hearken our own folk way to that of another Aryan faith, that of Buddhism, where it is all about the middle path, the path down the line between the extremes. And lest people have any doubt, the Vedic texts talk about, well, not the Vedic, but the Buddhist texts talk about the Buddha who had eyes like cornflowers. And so, yes, he was not the dark-eyed low-caste Indian. He was one of the Brahmin caste. So I think we can get a lot of benefit from studying that path. Although I do not agree with a lot of what Buddhism has to say. I don't think that life is suffering. I don't think attachment causes suffering. That a lot of those things, again, are too extreme. To sit in the woods by yourself and meditate, like the ascetics did, is a form of extremism. So that is certainly not the path for us. We are people of the world because this world is beautiful and joyful, and but we just can't get too extreme in any of the ways that we approach it. One of the fundamental things that came up, now it seems like a lifetime ago, and maybe it was we got a lot of inquiry, certainly I did, about being able to take a religious exemption for the COVID vaccine. Now, I don't want to harsh anybody's buzz. I did not take the vaccine. I think it's a terrible idea, and I think that it's proving out that it was a terrible idea and always was. But there's nothing in our religion that says you can't take a vaccine. I think most vaccine schedules are overdone. That's a personal opinion, not a medical opinion. And if there was an Ebola outbreak, I'd be the first one in line down there getting the Ebola vaccine. But there are other means of preventing those sorts of things without being that radical extreme of all or none. Was it the Source family that that there was a guy who, he had a whole bunch of followers. And again, in that idea of extremism and extreme renunciation, they gave up all their goods. They lived together. They ran a restaurant. And their leader said that Western medicine is poison. Do not ever go to a Western hospital. Then he had a hang gliding accident that caused massive internal injuries, and he said, "Take me to the hospital," and they said, "No, that's against our teaching," and so he died because he was an extremist. So we can eschew a lot of the trappings of the modern world, but still remain a part of the good parts of technology and of healthcare and of the printed word, which you see displayed behind me. All those sorts of things are good modern inventions that can make your life better if you're not too extreme in your approach to any of it. I'll tell you again a personal example from my own life. In law school, there were some of those students who were there at the school 60, 70, 80 hours a week, which was good because they were preparing themselves for a career, the kind of career that they wanted, where they were going to be slaves to some big law firm for 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And, that's just not the kind of lifestyle that I think is healthy. The moderate lifestyle says you earn enough money to make a decent living for yourself. No, I don't want my antivirus to renew. You can make a living for yourself, but without being too attached to the material things. There are studies. There's a whole couple of documentaries out there about how much money it takes to be happy. Most people that they interview say that they ask the question, how much money do you need to be happy? And people say that the answer by and large is about 20% of whatever your number is. So if you're making $50,000 a year, you think, man, if I just had 60,000, if you're making 100,000, if I was 120,000, then I could be happy. But you can be happy with what you have. The other way to be happy is to want less, to live a moderate lifestyle. I drive old cars, I thrift shop, and I come home and read stories to my kids. Well, not anymore. They're 25 and they're not interested in what I have to say anymore. But back in the old days, I made a modest living for myself. I made enough for me and my family, but without being so attached to the material things that I felt like I needed to have a new car or live in as big a house as they would sell me, or go on some big, real expensive vacations, because enough is where you need to be. Which reminds me, I meant to say before I started talking about moderation that I think of these shows as cumulative. So if you have a question about the financial stuff that we talked about in the way back when, and maybe you couldn't join the show then, but you watched it in the interim, and you have a question about your financial stuff, I'm happy to answer that question. I'm happy to answer questions about my approach to health. That, some of the things I do are not what everybody would do. A cold shower. So some of those things are moderation, just writ large, with approach to health, with approach to lifestyle in general. Again, the health aspect is another aspect of living in moderation. I don't think raw veganism is the way to go. I also don't think eating every time you come across a McDonald's and you got a hankering for some terrible French fries, that's not the way to go either. So you have to walk that middle path, where you eat enough, you eat healthy, but you don't gorge yourself. And again, that is a life of moderation. That's the starting point.
So someone bought us 3 coffees. That's a $15 donation.
Nice.
We appreciate you, someone. I don't know whether that was Nick being clever or that's literally the pseudonym they chose. Either way, we appreciate it.
That's just what it said.
Fair enough. All right. Something that I wanted to mention about moderation that I think when people say moderation, we immediately, as Alan mentioned, we think about alcohol. I think we also, as Alan mentioned, think about food. But what I don't think we consider enough is moderation in other things in our life. Many of us, and I think a lot of our audience, we find ourselves in a very politically extreme time to where if whoever you identify as the other team says one thing, the response is to immediately run as far to the opposite side and pick the edgiest thing over there to say to somehow counterbalance it or counter signal it. And in doing so, we allow our enemies to determine our narrative. And we may not think that we do. It is, as Alan said, it is a much easier thing were we to say, the AFA says, infinite drunkenness, or the AFA says, complete sobriety. The AFA says, you lose if you cannot consume the most food at whatever table you find yourself at, or, if we don't see ribs and you're not doing it right. The challenge is our religion is about nobility. We use the term Aryan because our people identified themselves as the noble people. A part of nobility is having the discretion in your own life to make meaningful choices, to choose when to indulge and to choose when to refrain, to choose how far down a path to go, what's right for you. Again, we all have different tolerances for a lot of things. Case in point, over the years, and this has gotten increasingly better, it's not a significant problem these days, but we'll have somebody that will be at some kind of function and they will get far too far in their cups. The immediate response is, shouldn't we make a rule that there's no alcohol at this, or no hard liquor, or only this, or only... No, we shouldn't. The drunkard should stop drinking, and everyone else who has control of themselves should be able to make noble choices as noble people. Or no dogs anywhere near something, because ill-behaved dogs are becoming a problem. No, the ill-behaved dogs shouldn't be there. The others, can figure it out. Making sweeping rules is very, very easy, but a virtue in our faith is developing the nobility in people for them to make correct choices about how to balance their lives. And again, let's not be immoderate in our moderation. We're not saying everything needs to be 50-50. That's ludicrous. What we are saying is everything needs to be intentional. If you choose to indulge, fine. If you reach a point where, man, this feels good, I'll have a little bit more. Fine, if that's something that you weigh and measure and decide to do. But what we don't want is you to get carried away by your whims, by unanalyzed emotion, by, I don't know, trying to impress the dude next to you, whatever the case might be, to make stupid choices. And when I say that, I'm not admonishing anybody. I think that we've all done that. I guarantee you I have. I think that everyone does that from time to time. But one of the things that has been meaningful to me is, the All-Father seems immoderate. He is the master of ecstatic fury. But there's meaning in that. He is not mastered by ecstatic fury. He masters the ecstatic fury. He's able to consume a tremendous amount of overwhelming stimulus to do things, and he is able to ride that stimulus in accordance with his will. None of us are suggesting that you ought to be free of emotion or free of indulging in things or enjoying things. But it always needs to be done mindful to your will. And if your will is not in the driver's seat, that's when we would caution you to exercise some moderation.
Right. And there's the I think there are several points that illustrate what you're talking about very well. Certainly one that I have to bear in mind often is the idea of delayed gratification. I think that's part of the idea of whatever you're looking for, whether you're spending on a new suit or a car, you have to think, well, I need this money for some other higher use next week, next month, next year. When you're deciding how much buffet to put on your plate, how much is this going to affect my long-term health? Am I going to be able to eat dessert? Am I going to be able to have that second beer after if I eat this much bacon? So all those sorts of things, if you keep the long-term in mind, that helps you moderate your present, knowing that there will also be a future. And certainly the idea of emotional moderation is an important thing. My youngest and I were talking just this evening about some of the wrongs that have been done to me and the wrongs that I've done to other people, and just the idea that you can't be so completely emotional with your heart on your sleeve all the time, so that the least bit of grievance makes you fly off the handle and do and say things that you're going to regret, because we have to keep it in the framework of the imperfectibility of the human condition. We all make mistakes. We all have offended people and taken offense, and but there's a line in there, a line of moderation where I can take a little bit, but I won't take a lot. The other thing that came to mind during that discussion too was the idea of confidence. If you're confident, that is one thing. If you're comfortable, as the saying goes, comfortable in your own skin, and you feel like that you are in a good place and those sorts of things, then that can be a good thing. That sort of moderation in the way that you conduct yourself. Too much confidence is hubris or egotism. And again, that we're in that balance point. We have to live in that balance point where we're okay, but not tremendous.
Yeah, so this is all right. There's a couple of things. The emotional thing plays in a lot of different ways, and it's interesting just formulating this conversation, how much it plays on tonight's subject. A lot of us tend to be emotional eaters. Now, I do not need strong emotion as an excuse to eat, because I could put down some food, but I do notice that if I'm adjusting my diet and maybe there's an overage I'm countering for and I'm really low on carbs, you feel an emotional pull to eat, and it's interesting on how you handle that. A lot of people I've known, especially, I'm sorry, but it's true, especially ladies, have a tendency to emotionally eat, and they'll find comfort in overconsumption of what we all know as comfort foods, and it very seriously does affect them emotionally, and it does make them feel better for that moment. Being able to recognize when emotions are making you act a certain way, and then moderating that action. And for anybody who's picking up on how many times we're going back to tonight's theme, it's called branding. We're doing it on purpose, but it's there. It's a thing. So that goes to your consumption of food, or when you're depressed and you just want to have a drink because it makes you feel better and chill out, and it does. And then you want to have, 6 or 7 drinks to chill out. And, there's a point where it becomes counterproductive to what you're trying. But it also comes in how you treat other people. if you are upset and something offends you in some way, or maybe something hits a insecurity that other people aren't aware of, it is easy to be emotionally compelled to overreact to something or to somebody, or to make really big emotional decisions about, quitting something you're involved in, or breaking up with a partner, or severing a friendship over something that wasn't well thought out. You just reacted emotionally because you got angry, or you more likely you got embarrassed or hurt feelings over it. Very little is sacrificed in taking a breath, sleeping on it overnight, and then making a decision. But, many of us fall into that trap all too often. I've always said that being Aryan is about making choices. Um, it's very easy to always find yourself counterpunching something, or just in a constant state of responding to the things other people do. And as best we can, we want to get out of that. We want to absorb the information that comes into us. We want to process it. And then from that place, we want to make a decision about how to act. When you get to where you're always reacting, it's very hard for you to accomplish the things you want in life. It's one reason that in fighting, it's a very good strategy to constantly keep your opponent on the defense, because as long as they're reacting to what you're doing, they're not executing their plan. And that's something to keep in mind. I'll say this is, now is the time of the program that we go to Matt's cringy bouncing stories. But I used to always tell my guys, like, hey, I'm cool if, whenever I've got your back. If you feel the need to get us involved in a fight, cool, I'm there for you, got you. But don't you dare stumble into a fight and then have me have to pull you out of it because you weren't thinking. When you're interacting with other people, there's a lot of stuff, if you think about what you do and you think about the consequences of it, that you can manipulate the situation. And again, most of these things about the idea of moderation, you can do lots of stuff that you want to do. Make sure it's because you have chosen to do it, not because something outside of you has compelled you to do it, and not because the lower portions of yourself have taken hold of your senses and drug you in a direction.
Yes,
a lot of what I'm. Go ahead.
And then this is the time for my boring yoga stories, because that always brings that point. One of the ways that I cut my drinking down 95% is when I started meditating, because even just after a couple of beers at night, I could tell the difference in my meditation the next morning. So I sometimes say I went from 3 beers a night to 3 beers a month, and it's that, but that too, the yoga school that I went to teaches complete abstinence, but I don't follow that school. I follow our way. And our way says you can have a couple of beers occasionally. So it's so as long as you do it in moderation, set and setting, those sorts of things.
There's 2 things that I wanted to kind of mention. When it comes to spiritual practice, a lot of people, when they're incorporating runic work into their spiritual practice, one of the first things, or a strategically used thing, is the Galder and invocation of Isa, the rune of ice. Oh, thank you, baby. Of ice and stillness, because many people, myself included, use it for a centering, or a bringing you back to a place of stillness, taking a few deep breaths, getting in a place where you've detached yourself from emotion and you can be objective and go into your practice. And I think a lot of people do that in different forms when they're doing their spiritual practice, but I think that has value. And I think that's all about removing yourself from the impulses that might make you immoderate in your actions. And I think
And
that's a
even
really
then,
important
like
thing.
too much ISA is rigidity. So
Mhm.
you have to be still, but without being brittle.
Mhm.
So again, it's there's a little bit is plenty.
Yeah, and the other thing that I kind of wanted to mention is there is no such thing as equality. That is, it really does not matter what your religion is. That is demonstrably true. That is a lie. That is a lie that people have fed you. Please reject that in the entirety of it. It is not true. There are no two things, no two people, no two anything that are equal to one another. And that presents an additional challenge. If you have a low tolerance for alcohol, or maybe you're just a bad drunk, and your friends have a high tolerance for alcohol, they get to drink what they want if they're in control of themselves, and maybe you don't. And that's something nobody likes to hear, you know. Maybe some people with awesome metabolisms can eat whatever they want and they're cool. And maybe you balloon up, or maybe you have a health condition where you can't. It doesn't mean everybody else shouldn't have fun because you are at a disadvantage. It means you need to recognize your circumstance and make willful decisions based upon that. And that is a challenge when you realize that it's not fair and that other people maybe can do things you can't do. Or maybe you can do things that other people can't or should not do.
We started watching Malcolm in the Middle again, and that's that's their theme song is life is unfair. So that's the starting point, and if you don't like your situation, you can do something about it. And certainly the other members of the Witten, your Gothar, have life experiences that you can talk to them about. I'm happy to talk to any member about their legal situation and try to help you. Some stuff I know about, some stuff I can guide you in the right direction. But those are the sorts of things that don't be afraid to ask for help, because again, that to get back on the point of moderation, we are expected to be self-reliant, but not everything. I mean, there are some construction projects that I can do. There's some stuff that I will not undertake. There are mechanical things that I can do, with my car. The rest get my mechanic to do. This is, for good or ill, this is an era of specialization, and there is no shame in asking for help from somebody who has been down the path and who has experienced those things and can do something better than you can, just like what Matt's talking about.
And that's a big part on the self-reliance is that is a caution against becoming a victim that is helpless. Part of community, and it's always been the case with our ancestors, is you're able to pool resources physically, but also, with your wisdom base and your skill base from all those experts that Alan talked about. And that's a really beautiful thing about the Asatru Folk Assembly. If you're a member, I would highly encourage you to talk to your local folk builder about some of those options. One of the cool things about having as many members in the Asatru Folk Assemblies that we have a member in just about every trade you can imagine. We have a member with some kind of relevant life experience to most any situation that you're facing. I talk about this a lot amongst our Gothar. The longer that our priesthood is in place and the more we are tightly knit to one another, we have a vast wealth of experience awaiting any new Gothi when they face a new problem. Hey, I've seen something similar. We have that, and it's a tremendous resource. So remember that's there. We have an image in our head of the rugged individual being able to just pull himself up by his bootstraps and do everything himself, and that's awesome. If you can do that, You are amazing, and we will celebrate you, and it's fantastic. But as I say on here a lot, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. What we want is for you to win. And if you can win through some, force of will alone, fantastic. But if you need to call in your buddies to help you win, the victory is what's important, and we want to help you get there. And I hope that you guys will help me get there or help Alan get there. We all have times that we need help with stuff. There are quite one of the reasons this is called Adulting with Alan. Alan is my go-to when I need adulting advice on things, because there's all kind of stuff that he's got figured out in his life in a different way or in a better way than I have, that I want to know about. And I hope that we all do that to one another. That is the entirety of the Witten, is there are people who bring a different experience, a different set of eyes to situations that I face and that we all face, that I'm able to get perspectives on and get advice on. And and this goes into the question I want us to answer from Rachel Kinsler. Could you speak on tools for people to develop the practice of moderation? How can someone who struggles with moderation learn how to recognize and navigate it? Alan, do you have any thoughts?
Many thoughts. I think one of the things that I had to practice for a while, and I had to do it physically when I started a reduction diet. Anything you eat is a diet, but when I started trying to lose weight, one of the things that I had to do was portion control. And so when you're talking about baby steps, or as a starting point, I would put my normal portion on a plate, and then I would take 20% of that and I'd put it back in the pot. And that was making that physical decision right there, in a very graphic way. I want this much, but I'm only going to take that much. Part of the rest of it is I had to stop keeping snacks in my drawer, because I would sit and eat nuts all day, because I thought they were good for me, and they are, but not sitting there eating it all day. But that's a start. One of the things that again, a long time ago, I started practicing as a form of like reinforcing moderation, is when I started drinking less, I started buying more expensive beer. So I at some level, I wasn't spending any less in the aggregate, but if your beer costs twice as much and you only drink half as much, you're making progress. But it doesn't feel like punishment. And that's part of the way that your brain is set up, is you have to reward yourself for those small things, which again is why moderation is the key to it in a lot of ways. Because if you go 3 days without a drink, then you can reward yourself with a drink. If you go 4 days without eating any sugar, then maybe you can have a small treat after you've eaten all your vegetables on that fifth night. So those are the sorts of things where you can moderate your approach to moderation, is by taking it in small steps, where you don't feel like you have to turn completely from the modern American super chaos processed diet, but you can start by drinking half of an energy drink and then throwing the rest away because it's bad for you.
I don't know that at all.
See, that way you can wean yourself off of that particular brand of
Why would I want to be less
infusion.
awesome? I want to be moderate in awesomeness.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. So, and even financially, there's a difference between being super stingy with yourself, with your family, and being frugal. I mean, frugal just means getting the most for your money. So you can still buy things occasionally, but you just don't go in for. And again, if you like say you go all week without stopping at Starbucks first of all, why are you going to Starbucks? And secondly, but if your habit is you go through Starbucks or the Circle K every morning for a cup of coffee, and then you cut it off for 4 days, maybe then that fifth day you say, well, I've been really good this week. I can indulge myself, in this $2 or $3 or $5 indulgence. So it's a way of rewarding yourself for taking steps down the path to moderation.
All right. I'm looking at a couple of things on our questions situation here. On the topic, though, we have a couple. One thing that someone asked, and I can't find it in the questions lineup, but I saw it, was, have we ever had, how do we know when someone's had too much at an AFA event? And have we ever had to, intervene in that kind of a circumstance? So, truth is one of our virtues. And again, it doesn't look good. This is not a frequent thing at AFA events. But way back when, there was a lot more of a drinking culture. We have had a variety of people come through the Asatru Folk Assembly, some of them with problems with
various forms of indulgence.
I was gonna blame it on alcoholism, but there's some of that. But no, some people are just jerks that don't know how to behave in public.
And the alcohol brings it out.
Yeah, and the alcohol enables it. That's what I was going to say. Some people are actually alcoholics. Some people are just bad drunks and don't know how to handle their liquor. And some people have a lower tolerance. There have been people at AFA events, and here's the thing. Everyone wants us to have these precise answers, and the trouble is equality doesn't exist. We don't have some kind of a breathalyzer that we go around with, and if you blow up, 0.08, we kick you. That's silly. But we do have, when we observe that you are not in control of your actions or your speech, and you seem to be compromised in a way that is having a negative effect on yourself and the folk, then, we talk to you and we assess that. And that might look different with different folks on what happens. But yeah, there have been people that have been, helped to sober up, or that have been, asked to leave, or perhaps their friends have been asked to take them somewhere to let them sleep it off and get back in control of themselves. That has occurred. Again, I'm trying to think, and not very often. That was a problem when we had a lot of skinhead members. That was a thing, and very problematic. It's been a long time, and it's really, like I said, not a frequent thing. But when I was a folk builder, there were times at events that I've had to, be on the front line of monitoring certain people and making sure they were not a nuisance to the rest of folks. So, it has happened, but it's certainly not a frequent occurrence.
That's one of the great things that I would say I'll take a tiny bit of credit for nudging us along this path. Because it did used to be, what we still disparagingly refer to as Asatru culture, where it was, we would get together and drink like we imagined the Vikings did. And I think that first of all, I think that stereotype is a little bit overblown. But I also recognize that the Vikings are at least the ones that are so often portrayed and end up being the role model in some ways for this sort of extreme or inebriate behavior. They were in life or death situations every day. And when you're risking your life to try to make a living for yourself, and you're where your very likelihood is that, you're going to end up on the wrong end of a spear point, then maybe you've got an excuse for overindulging in alcohol more than occasionally. But in the modern world, that excuse is largely that time is over. And and especially now, and again, it's the circular thing where it's hard to say what has been cause or an effect. But now that we have so many beautiful women around, so many lovely families around that are an integral part of the AFA folkish culture, we men behave ourselves better around women. That too is a part of that natural behavioral cycle.
And something that I've watched happen, we used to be guys. So Asatru has evolved quite a bit in Alan and my time of being involved in it. When he and I started out, it was a lot of single guys. It was a lot of single guys with varying degrees of social competency, and they'd get together and they'd drink and they'd beat their chest about Viking stuff, and there were good things at that time, but there were some things that definitely needed some work and some tweaking. There's been no crackdown on alcohol culture in the AFA. What has happened is we've grown up and we have families, and you don't see that anymore. You don't see that kind of silly nonsense because most of us have grown up and realized that we're there for a spiritual purpose. So yeah, people can drink and have a good time, but we typically don't have problems with that. And if there are problems, they're handled, I don't know, quickly and gently, and it gets dealt with. The other thing that, so okay, we got a couple of questions stacked up here, and one of them is long, and I'm hoping I'm going to get to it right. Anyways, let me see where we're at. All right.
While you're reading that, let me go back and talk about something that I forgot. Which is, I was actually just reading today an analysis about why it is that we have this stratified youth culture in our world nowadays, and it comes out of the way that schooling is done. We have this K through 12 and maybe some graduate school and whatever, where for hours and hours and hours a day, you're isolated in people of your own age group. And so and it used to be that education occurred organically. Your father taught you a trade, your mother taught you women's skills, and you were more integrated into an all age culture. But now we've got this idea, like the hippies used to say, don't trust anyone over 35, and that's because hippies smell bad and don't know anything. But we've gotten out of that idea of going to the elders for help. Find me, and you're getting there soon, Matt. We elders have, what's the farmer's commercial? We know a few things because we've done a few things. I've made lots of the mistakes out there, and I can try to guide you off the worst of them. And I am happy to share my experience, how to keep you off the third rail. And that was a natural, organic part of the culture until very, very recently. And so this strong-headed, isolationist ideal that we think of as being part of the Viking culture, I don't think was part of their thing. They were, you didn't go off in a boat and row and try to take on a village yourself. It was you and your men, and and the women and the family was waiting for you at home. It was an integrated, holistic approach to everything.
Absolutely. And I think in moderation also goes, I think this is worth saying, and then we'll get to the next question here, but it also means don't be a pearl clutcher if other people are drinking too. Like, what I have noticed too is when you have people who have a bad experience, if they have had an alcoholic problem, then all of a sudden no one else can drink because drinking's bad. No, drinking was bad for you. And that's a really different thing. We run into that in a number of different situations. When you decide what's good for you and what's not good for you, if you genuinely believe it's a good thing, then by all means, encourage your fellows to do that. But don't be obnoxious. It's not your job to dictate to everybody else where their set points are. We notice those when they become burdensome upon others. And that's how we notice when somebody's going too far with some stuff. So keep in mind, part of moderation is don't be extreme about everything all the time. Sometimes be willing to let somebody else have a different idea than you do about something without automatically putting him in the camp of, the enemy somehow. We do that a lot to our own disservice. So moderate your zealotry when it comes to what you think everybody else should be doing all the time. And we would find a little bit more peace within our folk and a more productive place to have those discussions in ways that are going to yield better results for all of us.
Absolutely.
We have a question that was asked of Svan last week, but he would like to get, or the asker would like to get mine and your opinions, Alan, or takes. What are your thoughts on the manosphere, alpha males, sigma males, and Andrew Tate? Alan, what are your thoughts on those things?
I have some vague awareness of who Andrew Tate is. I think if I'm reading his spot correctly, I think he is an overreaction to the feminization of the culture. I certainly think that men should be men. And, but again, if you're that the too macho, over the top, women are only here for my amusement, that's the sort of extremism that is too far the wrong way, way too far the wrong way. So I don't know about the sigma male thing. Although if it's in the same quadrant as where Andrew Tate is, I would have a similar distasteful reaction to that sort of thing. But that being said, what these men are reacting to is the feminization of men, especially in the West, where for too long the culture has been feminized, and there's a long literally psychological reason for why that began to happen, starting with Freud and his irrational approach to the human mind. But so many men have become feminized, and they want to act like women. And I don't mean even necessarily just the transgender thing, which is its own psychopathology, but but just in general, that, for example, education, the entire approach to education has been completely feminized, in the sense that girls, for the most part, generalizing, girls for the most part can sit in rows in a desk and learn from a teacher teaching them stuff. Boys like to be out and doing stuff, and they need to get out some of that energy, which is why so many American males have been, doped down, because we don't have an outlet for that American maleness, for the innate genetic maleness that is men. So yes, so Andrew Tate and people of his ilk have just taken what could be a good idea and go way too far with it. And again, that's that's that middle path. We respect women. We love women for their differences. We don't want to be like them, except in the idea of mutual respect. We are not equals, but complements to each other. We can be the man, they can be the woman. Look, those two parts make a whole. That's whereas Um, the hookup culture has ruined all of that, both for men and for women. The vulgarization of the beauty that is biology has been vulgarized by, I hate using air quotes, but I will this time, culture. And again, because they're reaching toward the lowest common denominator, because that's the one part where we are all equal. We can all be base, we can all be vulgar, we can all be profane, but it takes more than that to be a higher person who can reach the higher the higher goals that that are inherent in high culture. And to be noble is not something everybody can do, but something that we can all aspire to. Is that anywhere near the question that we were talking about?
No, it absolutely is. And I'll say this, to achieve nobility might be beyond the grasp of some, but to be more noble tomorrow than you are today is not. Lift yourself up, look upwards, try to be better than that. So as far as the manosphere as a concept, it's very broad, and it is kind of, I don't know, it's difficult to have a sweeping statement on the manosphere. There were a lot of really good things, about 10 years ago in that space. It became really redundant over time, the exposure that I've had to it. So it becomes a little bit cringy in some of its manifestations, but I don't think all of it has to. We have, for better or for worse, but it is what it is, I guess, is the thing I want to say. We have found ourselves with a alarmingly high percentage of young men that have no concept or context for being young men. They don't know what to do with it. They're in a society that has demonized masculine impulse, labeled it as toxic, and has feminized them to a shocking degree, and in a way that they're not even aware of how they've been feminized. We have a lot of weaklings, and the effort to take those young men, say, hey, we've got you. We'll be your older brothers, your fathers, your, insert the male in your life you haven't had here, and try to guide you towards masculine things. That is fantastic. And I'm very much in support of that. I think one of the really valuable things we can provide as a community is mentoring young men to grow into manhood in a healthy, whole way that contextualizes their masculinity in a way that's healthy. And I think that's very much needed. I understand the concept when talking about wolf packs of alphas and betas and sigmas, and I get those things. They get over a lot of good things really make me cringe, because those concepts exist. I get it. But every man who sees those concepts wants to think they're the alpha male, or I guess what's now been popularized as the sigma male.
It's even more funny to think that the scientist who first wrote about alpha males and alpha dogs, alpha wolves, has now said, yeah, that's all BS. I was wrong.
It's one of those, but I mean, we get the base concept that there's going to be men that are assertively masculine, that through their assertion and exhibition of masculinity, other men are going to follow, and other people in society are going to naturally fall in line with. And I think that is a social concept that we see, but I don't think it's helpful, because again, everyone thinks they're the alpha male. and they're not. It doesn't work like that.
But at the same time, what we have to avoid is the more modernist approach to where everybody becomes an omega male, and we're all retiring and shy and make every concession to the feminine, because that puts us in the opposite place where
as an ideal to strive towards, sure, but it goes into the metastasized, silly, like, caricature of masculinity that is I guess the dark side of the manosphere. Is this, you get these lame virginal dudes that want to talk about, white Sharia now and whatever else. And it's real silly delusion for them to go in, and it messes up a lot of potentiality for them. So I think where we can find positive mentorship for young men, that's amazing. Andrew Tate is silly. I don't always disagree with him on everything, but I don't consume a lot of Andrew Tate. I mean, dude's in good shape, but like all of his stuff, he needs to have a shirt off all of the time in a conspicuous way. There's a lot of stuff to unpack there. What I think is really important, it comes up in terms of moderation. When the feminists and the left go so far in their feminization of everything, then people think that the answer is to, like, comically, absurdly, and sometimes abusively be quote unquote hyper masculine. And it's not the answer. The answer is to move towards a reasonable and measured and appropriate masculinity and bring people to that. And as much as there's the outliers and the extremists like Andrew Tate, there's also a big thing about, no, here's how you dress. Here's how you do grooming things. Here's how you build a fire. Here's how you learn how to fight. There's a current within the manosphere that is completely healthy and amazing. And I really do like that. Our next thing is the complex one, and whoever, oh no, it's not. Cool. We got a reprieve from that. So nice bell music for Matt for later. This is later. Later is now. Did you by any chance have 2 minutes to listen to that song I emailed you? If so, any feedback? If not, all good. I understand you've got a lot going on. No, I remember you talking about a song and talking about emailing me. I don't remember getting any such song. I asked Nick if we got one somewhere that I didn't see. So just in case it's winding up in a strange folder somewhere, if you would send it to vns@runestone.org, I will have it and Nick will have it. And I promise, as soon as it's brought to my attention, I will gladly give it a listen and give you some feedback, because I am very interested in that. Here's the one. All right. Okay, so Nick says he's repackaged it differently.
Yeah, Tip, go to it further down where you'll see
at 631.
Yeah, you'll see 3 posts in a row that make it nice and clear.
Cool. Let's hope I got the right ones. So, White Horse Asatru. I have a question about the giant builder myth being a parallel to the harem Abif story. The 3 ruffians being an aristocracy, priests, and folk equaling the sun, moon, and Freya. The giant disguised himself as one of us, or a god, not a giant. Sounds like the shapeshifters. A giant builder story sounds like the Freemason story from our perspective. Very trippy. 3 ruffians, sun, moon, and Freya. In the giant builders deal represent cosmic balance needed in society. Hiram Abif was attacked by 3 ruffians with a ruler square maul representing aristocracy, priesthood, and the folk, and the 3 pillars of civilization. If the sun, moon, and Freya represent kingship, priesthood, and the folk, then without them society collapses. Just as the ruffians destroyed Hiram Abif represents the collapse of sacred knowledge in the Masonic tale. Seems like the same story from an opposite perspective, ours versus our enemy. Alan, do you have meaningful response to that?
Well, having been a Mason, I certainly recognize the where some of that stuff is coming from. I could unpack it maybe a little bit. I'd have to have like a Venn diagram and a cork board and some string to try to make all those cross correlations. I don't think that, at least from what I was able to pick up, I don't think that the parallels are exact in the difference between if I'm getting the right thing, like the Egyptian mythos is quite different from ours. The Temple of Solomon is certainly, is antithetical to our approach to things in a lot of ways. Certainly, many have questioned what I still think of as the Dumazilian approach to that tripartite hierarchy. Different civilizations, by the way, have different tripartite hierarchies. They just have, they still have three segments, but just
Swan would be proud.
Different order. I do think that that there's value in analyzing those things in that way. I think that our warrior priests were very much, again, and some of this is self-interest, or because of the way that we have constructed it reconstructed it in the AFA. There's the High Council, there's Gothar, and I think that in the folkish approach to things, the radical traditionalist approach to things, it's very much a pyramidal structure in the sense that we can, that only a few people can be in charge, and the rest need to, again, with a degree of moderated input, then they need to track out with the direction that we're taking. Beyond that, I don't see a lot of value in trying to fit, a horizontal structure into a vertical, or, a pyramid into a rhombus, or any of that sort of thing. That, it's a different thing. We have our Heimdallr, came and created the three castes, and we can each live a fulfilling and whole life within that structure. I feel like I'm dodging the question because it's so complicated. I wasn't able to keep it all in my head all at the same time.
All right. So I don't know about the question, but I do know about Jared Abbott buying us 5 coffees. This $25 donation. Thank you, Jared. Sweet. We appreciate you. I know I'm not going to just completely dodge the question. The person who asked the question is certainly much more familiar with Masonic lore than I am. I'm unfamiliar with Hiram or him getting jumped by 3 ruffians or any of that tale. It's not germane to my folk, so I'm really unfamiliar with it. I don't think there's any reason to believe there is a connection between Freemasonry and the Etic description of the giant and his building of the walls around Alsgarther. I think our brain really likes to see patterns. So when we see similarities between anything, it is very compelling to immediately find connection, oftentimes where connection is not, sometimes where connection is, and we just don't know it. So I can't, without knowing more about it, I can't say for sure, but I don't see any compelling reason to think so. I think there's also a Assassin's Creed thing that we get into now to where everything's got to be connected to everything else and everything is a super overarching whatever. I think, again, other people who are more knowledgeable about Masonic things will have a different view of this.
And there could
I
be
think,
parallels that are unintentional. And as one writer said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And those parallels can be.
It's funny because we're talking about a gentleman named Hiram. We're also talking about another gentleman with nasal proportions different from ours. But it is true nonetheless. I don't know. Here's the thing. I think Freemason stuff is tremendously powerful and important in the 1700s. And I think a lot of stuff before that is backfilled with connectivity and meaning that wasn't present, certainly in distant corners of the world that are claimed to have some relation to it. I think it's really easy to co-opt old stuff for new purposes. So I would advise against finding too much parallel there. Now, here's another
Although I'd
thing.
be glad to talk to the guy, like whoever it is that's asked the question. If you run into me IRL, I would be glad to have a conversation with you.
If you don't run into him IRL, Turnage at runestone.org, and you guys
I don't like
can have
long emails though.
He may not respond to you, but you're welcome to email him if you would like to. And so my levity at the comment is just because I'm not familiar with the Masonic lore, and I don't think the two are connected. But Alan may have a lot more perspective for you, and I really appreciate you asking the question. It was a very nuanced question, and I do think there was a lot there. So thank you for asking.
And
for
what it's worth, Edward Thorson wrote a piece that I bought. It's it's like a pamphlet book about that a lot of the Masonic symbology as currently adopted is actually is actually Western culture, Germanic stuff, like the way the doors open and the way certain things go along. It, when I was more involved in it, I could have been a little more up to date with it. So he too saw some parallels. Just like the way that people can say, and I've heard it in several mainstream podcasts lately, just taking for granted the truism that that Christianity was Germanized by the way that it came through Europe. So that it's a very distinct practice from what it would have been if it had stayed where it belonged.
Well, absolutely. And I've mentioned on the show a lot of times, if you look, I mean, it was of note during the Crusades when you had European Christians interacting with Middle Eastern Christians or like Egyptian and African Christians, their Christianity looked real different. And for good reason. So, the next thing up from Nice Bell Music. If the music that you send me does not incorporate bells, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed. I'm just saying.
Nice
question,
bell.
I mean, yes, I'm assuming they're going to be nice, or he would at least like my my critique if I do not find them to be nice. No, I'm sure whatever you're going to send is going to be lovely. I'm genuinely excited to hear it. Matt, how did your bouncing experience prepare you for your role within the AFA? So this is a good question. I was, matter of fact, just talking to a member this weekend at Ostara at Thorshoff about it. So that was an amazing series of jobs, and it's a lot of fun. There's girls and everybody's partying and it's a good time and it's awesome, and I've got really cool fight stories or whatever, but that's not the meat of what I got out of it or what I learned out of it. Now, in a lot of the physical stuff, I learned a lot about myself, but I also learned about working with a group of men that were depending upon me to help make sure they were safe and them to help make sure I was safe. And it's nothing compared to what soldiers go through. Please don't get me mistaken. But in its small way, it's the closest thing I had to an environment where, I mean, we had guns and knives pulled on us and such. So yeah, there was sometimes life or death things that I was able to work with a brotherhood of people through. And I'm very thankful for that. But outside of that, in the way that's relevant to AFA stuff, I was this was a part of me pursuing bouncing. So I was lame. We talk about this manosphere thing and I think this adds into that in a really syncretic way. I was lame. During my formative years, from like 5th grade until adulthood, I didn't have much contact with my dad. Some of that was my doing, is what it is. But a lot of that was my mom raising me and a father figure that I had until 8th grade was my grandfather, and he passed. And then a lot of it was me trying to figure stuff out on my own. And I was nerdy and lame and scrawny and, a lot of ways deficient from who I wanted to be. So I reached a point in 2000. Yes, if you're doing the math, in 2000, I would have been, 19. But enough was enough. I was going to try to do some things. So I started going to the gym. And over time, I had some different things go on. But eventually, in 2007, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pick the roughest bar in town, and I'm going to go bounce there. And I dove in, and I learned a lot about myself physically. But what else I did was I was this nerd. I had good nerds at least have their little nerd posse of like fat nerd chicks and whatever else they had. I was just a loner all by myself. I didn't even have that. I had like 4 guy friends, and that's what I had. So I'm going out there in the world and I'm jumping in the deep end. And what I learned most was, and this is a long meandering way to get to your point. So I was thrust into a situation. Let me tell you a little bit about the place I worked. It had 10 bars. That's not fair, but there were 10 bar surfaces where they served drinks. Functionally, though, there were like 3 dance floors that played different things. And Anchorage, Alaska is a really diverse place. So it was the world famous Chilkoot Charlie's, and it was like the place to be in town. We had a military base outside of town. We had a whole bunch of Hmong refugees we took in the 80s that since had children, and a huge Pacific Islander population, a lot of blacks in the military base, not a lot of Hispanics, but a whole lot of different kind of folks. And they would all come to the bar in their little groups. And then when the band had changed, they'd all mix up. But I was dealing with all of these people I'd never had experience with. And I'm dealing with, Hells Angels runs the territory up there. So I'm dealing with these like HA affiliated bikers and gang members and various Samoan guys claiming different, whatever they were claiming. And all of this stuff was brand new to me. And I was dealing with these people in very emotionally charged situations where people are drunk or they're high, or some people are just crazy, or maybe they've had a bad interaction between all the different things they're doing. And so I'm dealing with all these different groups of people in crisis situations, and I'm doing it all the time. One of the coolest things about jumping and bouncing there, because it was such a busy place, I was getting experience in life like at a vastly accelerated intravenous rate that just pumped me full of experience in just a few years very quickly. So what I learned a lot was dealing with people, de-escalating people, dealing with different kinds of people, and becoming comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And that's what's really helped me. And it's cool to talk about fights in those situations, but realistically, a number of them that stick out to me the most are women who clearly were emotionally disturbed, going through stuff where they were crazy, but they needed somebody to listen to them, and I was able to help them. Or remember some guys that had like a psychotic break. I don't know what all was going on with them, but I was able to be helpful. There was other guys there that were returning veterans that were having some extreme PTSD stuff, and I was able to recognize that, to learn to be comfortable within that, and to make that situation turn out a lot less ugly for a lot of people involved. And it helped me a lot. I got to a point there where people were pulling knives and guns on me that I could maintain my calm enough to resolve that in a way that nobody's getting hurt. And that's more challenging than you might think. What I did experience in my bouncing that was always bad is when you get scared. When you're scared and you react scared, people smell scared on you, and it makes them victimize you or react to you in some negative way. I saw more and more guys get into stuff they didn't need to because they were scared. My ability to work with different people at different points in their life in different, very extreme circumstances prepared me a lot, I think, for being able to counsel people as a Gothi. I have counseled, I have been blessed with the opportunity to counsel so many of our folk at different points in their life. And a lot of those are regular people just going through hard times. Some of those people have very severe mental illness. Some of them were going through very, very horrible situations in their life. I felt the bouncing prepared me to have that conversation in a way that didn't make the people that I'm counseling and talking to feel strange. I was able to maintain, to not be shocked by things that are outside of my norm. And that helps a lot. And I think it helps a lot in life. I'm very, very thankful for that opportunity. And that doesn't involve anything about whooping anybody's butt. I did some of that, but this is a lot about learning to understand people when they're at traumatic points in their life and being able to help them. And it's fun to talk about different fights bouncing, but I learned a lot more when I was on the losing end of those things. I learned a lot more than when I was on the winning end of them. And the people that I was able to help in some way, I'm a lot more proud of than, the people I was able to knock around a little bit. But yeah, I'm really thankful that it sounds however it sounds. That was a tremendous, tremendous benefit for me in my life. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity. And I'm very thankful for the men that I got to bounce with and learn lessons with. I miss those guys, and they taught me a lot. Alsey Coleman Miller the fourth bought us 3 coffees. That's $15. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. I want to make sure I'm getting these in order here. That last one was a lot of different spots.
Tyler should be the next one, and you should be able to go down from there.
That's what I was gonna. Tyler says, what do you think the best way is to beat a nicotine addiction? I'll do good moderating and cutting back and then fall off the deep end. Alan, what say you?
I've many times said that I'm glad I never picked that up because I am I have that sort of addictive personality where if I had ever gotten in that habit, I know it would have been hard to break, both because the physical addiction of the nicotine and because of the fidget, right? I'm always, and if I ever got in that habit of having the cigarette and, having the thing, that would have been a hard physical habit to break. As far as breaking the habit, I mean, I would certainly defer to the experts. I'm sure there are lots and lots of resources out there. And for so many people, and one of the reasons that there are so many approaches, especially to breaking nicotine or alcohol addiction, I think it's particularized to, there's an approach out there that will fit you. That's what I'm trying to get at. Some people, like, one of the ways, and again, I read about this, this guy who had been a lifetime smoker, he took a cigarette and put it on his desk, and he would look at that cigarette and he would go, "I'm stronger than you." And so that for that approach, that was, this guy just, he was not going to be bested by this inanimate object. And, just as a sheer act of will, he took it in that direct confrontational way. You want me to be your slave, but I am not your slave. I am your master. And I will prove it by leaving the cigarette right here and not smoking it. That's the kind of thing. And it's that can work. There are other ways that can be like, the slower thing where you write down every time you smoke a cigarette, and, you go from 20 on day one, 15 a day the next week. And then, you just gradually ease off again, just by strict record keeping. And again, making yourself accountable to yourself that you're, I'm not smoking that many cigarettes today. And I think the psychology of the way that you talk to yourself about it is also important. And this is one of the things that I've had to discipline myself to do is, rather than saying I'm not smoking, I don't smoke anymore. That's that sort of self-reinforcing way where you can bring it into the present, that you don't smoke right now. You're not going to smoke 5 minutes from now. You don't smoke anymore. I mean, that's one approach. And, be strong within yourself, find the path that will get you there. It's a tough habit to break. And I admire you for trying.
So here, if you recognize that your consumption of anything is compelled by forces outside of your control and not your will, you doing what you need to take control of your life is admirable. And the struggle itself is admirable. So good on you. I think physical addiction is different than mental addiction, and figuring out maybe what it is might affect how you address it. The other thing that I'd throw out there, are you addicted to nicotine or are you addicted to smoking? And I ask that because there is a difference. I'm not convinced that nicotine is bad for you. I'm convinced inhaling cigarette smoke is absolutely bad for you. But there may be ways to get nicotine that are not having those kind of effects. There's a lot of stuff there, but I know a lot of people who are addicted to cigarette smoking specifically. And it's not about the nicotine. It's about the having the thing in their hand. It's about the associations when they're drinking, they got to smoke. There's a wide variety there. I am very fortunate that I've never had a chemical addiction that I'm aware of. Maybe it's because I have a pretty high tolerance for a lot of things. I don't know. I think there's probably things that I get psychologically addicted to or have been in my life. But as far as a chemical addiction, I've never fought that fight. And I know that's probably a lot harder than most people who haven't had that experience think that it is. So don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Any little bit of progress you can make, that's something. It counts and it's something to be proud of. If you're able to wean it back for a while and then you mess up, it's a lot better than it would have been had you not tried. So
And don't beat
you
yourself up for slipping a little bit, because then you
you
I
will
smoked 2
fail every
cigarettes today. I
single
might as well
time.
smoke this whole pack. That's
Yeah.
you can be moderate in your approach to the way that you throttle back.
Some's better than a lot. And at the end of the day, some of these things are cumulative in their negative effects. So, successes here and there are better than no successes at all. And don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Go out there and do what you can. And everybody at everything fails every single time until they make it. That's the thing, is you chart all of those up. The only way to get from here to there is by making those efforts that are very likely to end in failure here and there. But eventually, if you stick with it, they won't. And
There is no effort without error and shortcoming.
Absolutely. And so it's worth doing, and I'm glad that you're doing it. If that's something that has control of you, take the control back, and reach out. People would be happy to help you in that struggle. Corey asks, we do coming of age ceremonies for boys, right? So, yeah, but sort of. We're in our infancy on it. An important thing is in the Asatru Folk Assembly. Haha. I didn't catch that, but I'm glad you did, Alan. It's process. So some important things to know in the AFA. Sometimes we will start what gets called a man-making kind of ceremony at 13-ish, and it's a process that culminates in adulthood. What has always been very important to me, ritual has to mean something. If you have a man-making ceremony and when you are done with it, you are a grown man, and we do that when you're 13, you can't do that and then say, okay, now it's your bedtime. Can't do that and say, yeah, but here you got a sharp stick because I don't trust you with the gun. You can't say, cool, do that, but it'd be really creepy if you're dating my adult child. Like, it has to actually mean something. So in the AFA, we do not certify or pronounce someone an adult until they are legally capable of being an adult in our society. I'm sure that looks different at different times in our history, but that's an important note to make for anybody. Don't do a man-making ceremony and then treat them like a boy the moment after. It defeats the whole purpose. So in the AFA, we like to start a process to where you get increasing responsibility when you're in that period, and where ideally you have the men of the AFA mentor you and help you to learn the things that you need to learn to become a man, so that we can wholeheartedly and excitedly take you through that threshold when you reach adulthood.
It's something that that many of us spend a lot of time talking and thinking about. It's frustrating when we are so dispersed geographically to be able to do it in a meaningful way that can then be reinforced by the members of the community. If it's, if it was like in the 1,000 years ago when and this is your first shield and spear, and then the first time you bring home a pouch full of silver, now you're a man. Those are the things that would be easy to make that demarcation. At the same time, I think it's important to give it a lot of thought, as we have. I think that we're trying to come up with that right triangulation between just because you reach a certain age milestone, that doesn't necessarily mean manhood, especially with the complicated relationship that the modern world imposes on contracts and alcohol intake and those sorts of things. So it's a, it's a complicated thing. It's definitely one that is a work in progress for us in the AFA.
I really like the period of, cool, let's start this process and let's work to get you there, because I don't want to conduct any kind of coming of age rite for some panty waste that, I don't care if he's 35. I'm not going to dishonestly declare him a man if I don't trust that he is in fact a man. This is a random side point on that. People used to like ceremonially to give, they would do these man-making ceremonies when this kid's like 12, and then they'd ceremonially give them some kind of historic recreation sword. I'm going to try to not be rude, but all of that's cool if that's the aesthetic that you like. If you would not hand him a 9mm or whatever, if in wherever the jurisdiction you're in, if you would not hand him a shotgun or a rifle,
Right.
don't hand them a sword. It's disrespectful. When our ancestors gave a young man a sword, they were trusting him with the responsibility of life and death. If you do not trust this 12-year-old boy in front of you to have your back, if in
a firefight,
if the enemy's coming for you and you don't trust this guy with your life, don't give them that. It cheapens everything. And that doesn't mean cast the person aside, they're worthless. It means take them by the hand and get them there. Build them up until they get to that point. And I think that's where we're moving, and I like that. Question for the law speaker. What is your take on David Ramsey and his 7 baby steps to financial peace?
I'm not familiar precisely with with that aspect of the Dave Ramsey program. I have steered many people toward Dave Ramsey. I think he has a lot of good ideas. Again, I think he is a little too austere in his approach to budgeting, and I can give you some specific examples. But I think if he has 7 baby steps out there, I would probably agree with 5 of them. I mean, I certainly like his overall approach in the sense that disciplined budgeting is the first step in getting control of your finances I still like cash. I don't have my wallet in my pocket, but I could show, I like to spend cash because there's a very different feel to going to a store and, and spending $50. If you have to take out the money out of your wallet, then it feels very different from just swiping that card. Because swiping $50 on your debit card is the same as swiping $5 on your debit card. It has the exact same mechanism. So I think one of the things that Dave Ramsey advocates, and that I do too, is, you set aside cash out of your budget for your incidentals, and and when that envelope is empty, you don't buy any more coffee. You don't go to the movie again. You don't go bowling. When that envelope's empty, your entertainment budget is over for that month. So yes, but like with ceasing smoking, I think those are the sorts of things that you can do in small steps and gradually change your life over a period of weeks or months, and with the goal being to be better tomorrow than you are today, to be better next year than you are right now. And so by all means, and if you want to email me a link, I can pick some of the stuff apart based on my own experiences. In case you don't know, I'm a bankruptcy attorney. I've looked at thousands and thousands of budgets over the years, and I have a good feel for what works and what doesn't. And I think both the carrot and the stick approach tend to work pretty well, especially in combination. So yeah, by all means, if you look at those things and find they have value to you, then I would agree with, if it resonates to you, then you can make it work.
So if you want financial peace, Dave Ramsey says that you should save $1,000 in an emergency fund. Step one.
That's a start.
That's step one typically is.
And he knows that it's a start. I've heard him talk about it every time. He knows that it's not even nearly enough.
Nick's on the train. Good.
Barely
So,
get. Yeah.
Hopefully we can get everybody onto financial peace. So step two, here's something I want to say up front. Dave Ramsey is a devout Christian, and his big thing is no matter where you're at, you give your 10% tithe to the church. He advises that if you are broke, and at every step of the way, that is admirable. And he is of a different faith than us. But that says a lot that he puts his values first, even when you're in a point of desperation. We run into members from time to time that are financially struggling, and it seems like their first choice is to cut back on, their AFA donation. And it's unfortunate, because I think that getting in good with your God or gods is a really solid investment no matter where you're at. And it's something that something that sets people of faith out from people who like the idea of it, but don't put a lot of stock in it. You literally put your money where your mouth is on it. I think that's admirable. And that is a point of Dave's. But point two is pay off all your debt except for your mortgage. And he does that through the debt snowball by paying off the smallest debt first and go in that direction. Step three, get a 3 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund, and to keep that in your account. So if something happens to you, change your job, you have an emergency, whatever, you've got that sitting there. Step four, to invest. And these are after you achieve the previous step. These aren't simultaneous. Once you have that, invest 15% of your household income for your retirement. Step five, save for your child's or your children's college fund, so you can self-fund that. If the alternative is to go into crushing school debt, then that makes a lot of sense. Step six, once you've done that and you have your kids' college taken care of, pay off your home early. And then step seven is build wealth and give. So you can invest and you can give money to stuff and you can save like no one else, so you can give like no one else. That's what Dave Ramsey says. No, it's really good stuff. And when Mandy and I moved out to California, when Odenshoff was purchased, when I became Alsherrigothi, we had some time there that was pretty tight, and we tried to, really listen a lot to Dave Ramsey and his method of doing stuff. And I feel like that helped us a lot. So I think it's a nice thing.
One other quick point Dave Ramsey also makes that I think is also important is he's so vehemently against buying a new car. Like in his mind, you've got to be to the level of rich before you even consider it.
You're on step 7 if you're buying a new car.
Yep.
I've never bought a new car. I've never owned a new car.
Yeah, it's hard to justify when there's so much depreciation the second they're not new. Like buying last year's car, I've never been in that life. If I get a car that's 10 years old, I feel like it's the newest, best thing I ever had. It's amazing.
As one car lot advertised in one place I lived, everybody drives a used car.
are we at on this? All right. So okay, I skipped one. Why do you call your Hoffs churches? We don't. We call the AFA a church because it has an implied legal meaning, certainly in the United States, and it has a social meaning as far as a large religious body that isn't equivocal. There's no other, like, certainly in the United States, and there may be somewhere else, there's no other term that captures the meaning more precisely as a organized religious body. But no, our buildings are Hoffs. They've always been called Hoffs. They are Hoffs. Sometimes the neighbors will refer to it as, oh, that Viking church or whatnot. But no, we don't refer to the Hoffs themselves as churches. And then we've got, all right, has anyone in the AFA ever tried to secretly or openly pursue an interracial relationship? And how do you handle that situation? Yes, lots and lots of people in the AFA over the course of years have secretly tried to pursue that. Some of them have openly tried to pursue that. Step one is to counsel them not to do that and to explain why that's counter to our core values. And if they pursue that and are officially engaged in said interracial relationship, then they are not eligible for their membership in the Asatru Folk Assembly, and they are removed from membership until they get their head on straight. Do you have more to add?
Doing that, hold on a second. I looked up the definition of, or actually the etymology of the word church, and it comes from the Greek word kyrios, which is a Proto-Indo-European word meaning to swell, spread out, to be strong, and prevail. So
yeah, there's talks
about a perfectly good Anglo-Saxon word.
Well,
and the current connotation is not the only possible meaning. I mean, church, temple, Hoff.
And that's the thing. Our house of worship is a Hoff. The organization as a body is a church because a church is defined specifically in legal terms under 501c3 religious designation. It's like 501c3 religious, in quotation marks, church.
Right.
So it has a meaning, certainly in the United States. And if you find yourself someplace different, I can see it being confusing. And I don't think anybody really doesn't know what we mean. So I think that's some of that semantics. I've also heard etymological connections to the German Kirche, or like circle.
Right, which is derived from that same etymology. That's right. So you don't want to get too bound up in trying to attach Norse words to what perfectly good Anglo-Saxon terminology.
That's silly because the Norwegian Kirche goes back to the exact same root. What it doesn't do is go back to any Semitic roots. So no, it's not
right.
That's not theirs. That's ours. But again, it's a point. We do not internally refer to our houses of worship as churches, but the organization as a whole, we do. So, where are we at on the next one? Have you ever heard of Return to the Land? Yes, we have. Alan, do you have anything to say about Return to the Land and whether we are aware of them and what our thoughts are on them?
Yes, they are a good bunch of folks. I've talked to a couple of them. I think the model they are working is really effective. It could be potentially effective for us. And in fact, if one of you listeners out there has $700,000 that you're willing to loan to us, we can implement the RTTL model today. Well, not today, but you know what I mean, tomorrow.
There you go. There you have it. Matt, when you say backyard barbecue, in quotes, backyard barbecue with 5 fat dudes, arguing over who gets the big piece of chicken. That sounds very specific. Were you actually at a cookout like this? And can you give details? So I am very happy that you, Odin Patraya Namaha, were not at said cookout. I am very proud that we have evolved Asatru to where that is no longer the norm. Most of us who practiced Asatru before 2010, 2015, that was the coin. The rotisserie chicken, the big piece of rotisserie chicken was the coin of the realm. So my example is kind of an amalgamation of a lot of things. And so I mean zero disrespect to where I come from, to my roots, to Asatru's roots in modern times. As opposed to sitting around on my computer complaining about how I wish the world was, I will gladly eat some rotisserie chicken in a camp chair, even if I got to fight fat dudes. I'm game for it. Really and truly, that's where a lot of stuff started, because that's the resources folks had. And we made the best with what we could. But I can remember, a lot of, so I had some younger, okay. And I say it disparagingly, because there's people that's as far as they would like to see Asatru evolve.
Right. That's what I was going to say, that that's where we all started. Some of us have moved past that.
Well, so we started in mom's basement complaining at other people on the computer about what it should be if it ever happened. Some of us got out of the cave and actually went out and went to the store and got some chicken and went to our buddy's house and brought a camp chair and did something. But doing that, the dream was always, and we talked about doing this bigger and doing it better and doing it more and having a bunch of people, get together and all doing this and having families and having hofs. We all talked about that. There's a lot of it is funny to me, and I do say it pejoratively, in 2025, when the same guys with the same chicken in 2015 never got up out the camp chair because we've invited them. No, I can remember a number of bloats like that. It was almost always either in someone's backyard or often at like a park. And you'd get a group, and it was almost exclusively guys. And you'd sit around in a circle in camp chairs. I could almost promise you at least one of those people was morbidly obese. Wasn't always rotisserie chicken. There's deli sandwiches. There was like if it was real classy, you could get a veggie tray. I remember, you'd have a variety of different beverages.
And there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff.
They were not top shelf beverages. And you'd sit around there and rotisserie chicken was good. You'd have a lot of chips, all of that. So I joke. I remember some fond times with some amazing people doing that with a half a loaf of bread and a half a cup. Many a friend were made. The point is not to disparage people doing the best they can. It's why are you still doing that when you can be over here doing something that we're all doing? This is what we all dreamed about. It's what we all talked about. Hey, come over here, do this with us and celebrate the success. And that's where we're trying to move and evolve. No, I had some awesome, just me and a couple of dudes in the backyard. I can think of one. We're at my friend's house. It was in Mountain View, which was a rough area of Anchorage, Alaska, and very humble apartment. And out in their backyard complex, there's a big hole. We burnt junk furniture for the fire in the hole, and we gathered around in the camp chairs. I honestly think there was some rotisserie chicken present. There's a number of those. Honestly, it's so many of our roots. I can remember so many of those people, and I look back at the people in the camp chairs. Very few of them are with us today here doing what we're doing. That makes me sad. I wish those guys were here with us. Yeah, it's more of a statement of, okay. It would be the same thing as me complaining about stuff in mom's basement, which I often do. No, when I'm 17, I did a lot of things in mom's basement. That was okay. But I'm a grown man. It wears differently in my 40s if I was in my mom's basement. There's a lot of stuff we did when we were first starting out in the teenage years of our Asatru expression. The goal is you don't stay there, you evolve into something bigger and something more. So I'm not trying to just be insulting. Yeah, obviously, there was a problem with it all being dudes and some obesity going on, and I poke a little bit of fun, but I'm not immune. I was there. I just tried to move it forward and accomplish a little bit of something. If all of the people in all of the camp chairs arguing over the big piece of chicken got up, came over here to what we were doing, we would be so much better for it. And the truth is, so would they. The other argument I want to say on it, and I know your thing is trying to get me to say some fun story about it. I'm all for it. I get that. But another kind of poignant point on it, those lost my train of thought a little bit on it. The big sadness is that there's so many people who talked about so many things they wanted to see. All right, I found back what I was going to say. The argument over the big piece of chicken is a reference to this. And we did see that in the day over a number of things, especially in the Theodish circles. Those of you who don't know, the Theodish guys were guys that had a really particular Anglo-Saxon flavor to what they were doing. And they really liked wearing Smurf hats. I think they still like wearing the Smurf hat. So there were, and I read this online, like this is the thing, I'm not making this up. The Theodsmen would have this very elaborate pecking order for their feasting. And they would argue about who gets the first pick of whatever the food was, be it rotisserie chicken or not. And it was this literally 5 guys fighting on who they're going to call king and who they're going to call earl and who they're going to call like the master of horse. And there's 5 guys. I don't fault anybody wanting to be the king. But to be a king, you need a kingdom. They would rather fight about how to divvy up 5 noble titles amongst 5 dudes sitting around in a circle than not have a big fluffy title, but be part of, 10s, 20s, 100 people gathered at a Hof, worshiping our gods in a way that builds legacy for our children. And that's the small-mindedness that I kind of, take a jab at when I make that expression. But Alan knows about the 5 fat dudes and the rotisserie chicken. That's our roots. That's legit.
Yeah. And
2 liter of Mountain Dew.
Right. And and I too have been frustrated by a lot of the folks that I know and have known through Asatru circles when I was doing the Florida Moot and that sort of thing. That there's so many of those people who that like they're concerned that we've become too, I don't know, modernized, like they just still have that Viking mentality that, that they think we're going to bring back the Viking era. Much like the Theodes, want to bring back this very rigid and frankly artificial structure to the practice. And I don't think that type of, I think either of those extremes, to bring it back to the topic, I don't think either of those extremes are proper in the modern iteration of what Asatru is, which is what we do. I mean, we talk about folkish Asatru, but that's redundant. Asatru is by definition folkish, and we are the folk, and we practice the way.
And it's funny. I like that.
And if you want to practice Asatru, if you want to lend credence and validity to the gods of your own people, then join the team and come in for the big win.
That's so hard for so many of our people, and I wish it weren't.
Let me now. As we're talking through, maybe part of it is that the fact that if you're in a group of 5, then you're in the top 20% of leadership, even if you're at the bottom. But if you come into a group of 50,000, then all of a sudden, you're not so far up the hierarchy anymore.
This is something I talked to somebody last weekend about as well. This is real and it's honest. And I want to preface this. I am the Alsherjar Gothi of the Asatru Folk Assembly. I sit as the autocrat of the most successful, biggest, has the most cool stuff, Asatru, anything that has existed in the modern age. I am very blessed and very fortunate. I don't lose sight of that. I know how it sounds. What I'm about to tell you, I promise you, I believed when I was just a guy that sent in, at the time, it was $2.50 to be a member of the Asatru Folk Assembly. So all of these backyard groups, especially if you've been doing it a long time, whoever is the leader of the backyard, whoever is the emperor of the 5 fat dudes, you can either be the exalted emperor of Backyardia, or you have to be a smaller cog in a much grander wheel. And a lot of guys, because we've had a number of groups of people, and some of them in their 5s, some of them 20 plus, that we've tried to get join the AFA. But what we run into is, if you're the person who's been leading that for a number of years, are you willing to not be the king of your 20 guys? And that's the best case scenario. Let's put an average, you're 6 guys, and instead maybe be a folk builder in the AFA. Maybe even talk to us, work something out, and get in a program so we can get you to be a Gothi in the AFA. But it's cooler if you can be the top guy in your really small group. And that's seductive. And I don't know if I was that guy, if I might not think the same way. I hope not. But again, I know where I'm at when I'm saying it. I get it. There was something before I joined the AFA called the Heathen Folk Revival. And there was, I was top 3. I think I was the 3rd guy in the Heathen Folk Revival. And it was Wyatt Kaldenberg. I don't know if you guys remember, but the dude that broke Geraldo's nose with the chair, he was the top guy. Underneath him was Sean Ridlin, who was a friend of mine at the time. I haven't spoken to him in many years. If he's listening, I miss you, Sean. I hope you're doing well. He had moved up to Wasilla, Alaska, and he was like the second guy. And I think I was like number 3. And we were trying to start something and trying to get something going. But I told those guys, I'm like, hey, why don't we just join the AFA? They believe the things that we believe, and look, they're successful and they're doing these things and they're moving this forward. What are we doing over here by ourselves trying to reinvent the wheel instead of getting on the team? And they didn't want to do that, and they didn't want a part of it. So eventually I broke with them and I said, hey, I want to go move Asatru forward so we have a legacy for our children and for what we're doing in the future. And again, they're so resistant because they wanted to be part of their own little, everybody wants to be the king of their own little thing. And I think it just misses the big picture. And I think folks that's their version of Asatru, that dies with them. That doesn't go into the future. That doesn't build something for their kids or for their grandkids. That doesn't make Asatru 50 years from now something more, something better than it is today. And I hope everybody can adjust the view on that. But I know what it's like. I've been in those backyards. I've eaten the chicken. I tried to fight for mine, make sure I could get a breast, but wasn't always the case, depending on the backyard.
Thigh's better anyway.
It's better, but it's less meat in it. It's a lot tastier, though. I can still get the skin on the breast, though. The rotisserie chicken did good about getting the flavor to permeate. I'll tell you what, right now, talking about it, I could go for a rotisserie chicken right now.
That's what I had tonight. I had rotisserie chicken that I picked and then cut some bacon up and grilled it with cheese.
My cousin and I used to go to the store. We'd each get a rotisserie chicken, and then we'd get a bag of biscuits, not biscuits, I guess, of rolls. And that we just feast on that. I joke about all these things. No, I get it. I'm not too good for that. I'm down. If you're hosting a mood at your house that's a rotisserie chicken and some camp cheers around a trash fire in your backyard, I'm not joking. Give me an invitation. If it's anywhere close, I'll be there.
There's a place for that, but you have to.
Wrong with that. That's just not the end result. That's not the,
that's a building. That's a building block to get us into a bigger, higher.
Exactly.
Spot.
And that's all that is. And we have fun with it, but I think we earned it because some of us have been there. And I'm glad that you guys don't see that as the norm. That means one of the things that I think is very gratifying for people who've been involved in this in an active way for a long time, we've worked hard to change to where that's not the norm. I run into people now that assume we've always had Hoffs. That's beautiful. And that's the goal that we want, is for that to be the new paradigm. Like, what are you talking about not having Hoffs? That's crazy. What do you mean? That wasn't always the case. So a lot of us can kind of poke fun at where we come from a little bit, but it's in good spirits and it's in proportion. Well, I guess this kind of follows on to that. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in the AFA since having taken over as Alsherrigothi? So before I get to that, I want to ask Allen. Allen, since 2016, what have you, I guess since Ostara of 2016, what changes have you seen in the AFA that you are important to you?
Well, a multitude, all for the good. Certainly, when I first started practicing Asatru, 2005, it was almost all guys, and there was a lot of, and certainly at the time, I would say, well placed or well taken bitterness about the fact that, especially as we first find our folk way, and we think, man, we should have been doing this all along. Those bad people took this away from us. Yeah, they did, and that's what happened. And so we just have to get through that and into a place where now, instead of a bunch of guys sitting around drinking, and certainly I had my spate of that during that period, but now we have families and women and children, and I think the biggest change can be summed up just by saying that we feel a sense of hope now. That we are building something better. We're not just living resenting the past and standing around being irritated. We're elevating each other to a better, higher place in our practice, in our personal lives, and our conduct of our daily selves. And that's what that to me is the purpose of religion. And that's something that we didn't have a real concept of in the beginning, and we're still really formulating it in a lot of ways. But we're trying to better each other and better ourselves and reach a higher place in the way that our gods are honored and the way that we honor each other and respect our families. And so even to use that sort of language, in the stuff that we were doing, and 20 years ago, it would have been viewed as out of place, if you will. I mean, even then we were certainly doing classes and lectures on better living and history lessons, but it was, it's like anything else. That was like the grammar school period, and now we're in middle school, as we're trying to find our way through. And I think our practice is so much better than it was. Our methodology, our understanding of what exactly we are doing in ceremony is so much clearer and more thorough than it was back in those days. I mean, I really feel like we were going through the motions without any foundational understanding, and but we had to dig through that, and in a lot of ways, I don't like to say we were faking it, but we did sort of probe our way into it, and as we practiced, we reached an understanding of what it is that we're doing on a psychological and metaphysical level. And I think the gods have blessed us with a journey toward success.
So to piggyback on Alan's a little bit, the idea of fake it till you make it, I want to put the caveat. None of it was ever disingenuous. But at some point you make a leap of faith. You don't know what you're doing, so you just try something and you hope for the best and you see what works. And I think that was a lot of the stage we were at during my early days in the Asatru Folk Assembly. We were trying new things and trying stuff because we knew it was kind of the right thing to do, but not really sure why, and trying to listen to the gods and each other and see what works and build on it. I have been tremendously blessed beyond measure from our gods in my time as Allsherrier Gothi. I have seen amazing, amazing things happen with the AFA. And what's more is I have been tremendously blessed with having some true heroes stand with me and help the AFA and be partners in what we've achieved. One of them is with me here tonight. I come before my altar just about every day thankful for the tremendous and overwhelming blessings that I have. Hey, sweetheart, this is one of them. So, it's come a long way in a lot of ways. I think what Alan is talking about with our why we do things we do is certainly a noteworthy part of it. When I became Alsarigothi at midsummer of 2016, we only had the one Hoff, and now we've got 4. We've got really solid plans on the next 2. So that's made a big difference. The focusing what we're doing in our gatherings and our worship at the Hoffs has been a tremendous thing. It's given us the opportunity to have a community interaction that we'd never have before. All 4 of the Hoffs food pantries have been during my time as Alsarigothi. And that's just it makes stuff real in the sense that the community, other Asatru, our parents, our families can go and touch and feel, hey, this is real. I can reach out and touch it. And as stupid as it sounds, hey, I can look it up on Google Maps and it is a location. It exists. That's a thing. So the other thing I was going to say on it, yeah, we've had such a huge surge, Aubrey. We've had a huge surge of families, of children, of women at our events. I met Mandy 2 years before, but building families within the AFA has been a big thing in my time. Early on in Asatru, our founders' generation didn't have a lot of success incorporating children into things. And I think we've come a long, long way with that. We have really advanced our scope. Early on, the AFA was largely a West Coast phenomenon. Now our membership is spread evenly, I don't think is fair, but is spread very significantly across the entirety of the United States and internationally. We're a lot more unified in our practice, in what we do. Our leadership are daily engaged with interacting with one another and with building and maintaining the Asatru Folk Assembly. The commitment of our members is at a much, much higher rate. This is earlier on, I think this is something that people interacted with maybe a few times a year. Some people maybe monthly. Now I think that a very healthy portion of the AFA interacts with this many times throughout the week, and there is a constant presence of the Asatru Folk Assembly in their lives. I think that's a really beautiful thing that's very different than it once was. And I think we're always trying to be more, to reach up, to do more, and to achieve victory. That's why, it's one of the reasons why this program's named Victory Never Sleeps. There's always so much more to do, and we've had a number of really hard chargers at that. And I think, talking to our founder, Stephen McNallen, and his wife, Githya Sheila McNallen, they're both blown away with where the AFA is. And they've both said to me that, never in their wildest dreams did they think that we would be where we're at. And they're both very happy with that. And that means the world to me hearing that from them. What else we got tonight? I'd like to hear you discuss Theodoric the Great, the Ostrogothic king. Which Dietrich poems would you recommend for beginners? Example, Friedrich's Saga, Rosengarten zu Worms. Which of those are your favorites? Alan, your turn. Go.
That is not my area. I'm getting some feedback. I'm more well read in the theory and practice of radical traditionalism. So I have some recommendations on, along that line. if you can find a copy of Aristocratia, first of all, if you buy me a spare, I will loan you one of them. They are currently selling on eBay for like $600. So that, but those and the tier journals, super good writing. The guys over at Tier are friends and allies of ours. The Tier journals have, to me, what is everybody has their own way of looking at these things, right? But to me, it is a lot less important to understand how an Ostrogothic king lived 1,500 years ago than how I can live a better and more noble, more traditional life 15 minutes from now. So that's where my focus is. So that's a long-winded way of saying I don't know.
Okay, so I am not well read in the poems celebrating Theodoric, but I am. That period of his life and his ruling in Italy, in northern Italy, there is really fascinating. His presence, his force of character as a man to be able to accomplish the things in his life and in the husk of the Roman Empire is fantastic. And I find him extremely, extremely interesting. What is bittersweet is that he's in that period of our people that betrayed our gods and broke troth with the Aesir. And I can't support or celebrate that. Theodoric was an Arian Christian. And again, relatively few generations before that, all of his folk worshipped our gods. So that's sad to me. But as a man, as a warrior, as a leader of men, his presence on the stage of the late Roman Empire is fantastic to me. And there's no way not to be impressed and not to find that super interesting. It just, unfortunately, I wish a few generations from him had stayed true to our gods, and his story would be all the greater. But I'm not really familiar with the, medieval epic poetry of him. I can't say that I haven't ever read it, but it's been a lot of years, and it wasn't something I spent a lot of time on because it is outside of the scope of Asatru.
But there are books that closely parallel that. I mean, Gates of Fire, about the Battle of Thermopylae, and that gets into a lot of detail about why the Spartans fought the way they did and were willing to give their lives knowingly, willingly, to throw their lives into the breach, to protect their tribe.
So something I do want to, I suppose, about Theodoric, if you like Gothic history and if the Goths are meaningful to you, it's always been very important to me. A disproportionate amount of our focus has been put on the Vikings. And I understand why, and I don't fault those reasons, but it doesn't give enough attention to other historic peoples that were true to the Aesir. And among them were the Goths. So along the lines of that, King Athanaric, was of the Thuringian Goths, was very important to me early on in my Asatru development. And it was important to me to honor him with a day of remembrance when I became Jarl's Herregothr. And he was one of the first ones that I did that with. And on June the 9th, we celebrate King Athanaric with a day of remembrance. So stay tuned because there are a number of other prominent Goths around that period that will be honored with Days of Remembrance. So in the coming days or coming weeks and months, you may hear about a few more of those. But no, the Goths are fascinating. Theodoric is just on the other side of that Christianization, which puts him outside of the scope of where I focus. Now, that's the last question that we have for this evening, but I want to mention we got a special treat for you guys in our outro music tonight. A member named Russ decided to compose a piece of music for us, and he unveiled it during Sumble on Saturday last at Ostar at Thorshoff, and it was a really beautiful piece and something we really appreciate. And I appreciated his performance. He has given us a version of that to use for our outro, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. I look forward to talking to all of you again next week when Witten Swan and I go over part 2 and I promise in part 2 we will cover more than 4 chapters in the Volsunga saga.
Sure.
So we appreciate you guys. Test it. We'll get at least 5 in there. I gave my word. I'm pretty good stickler on that. So 5 it is. We'll see. We'll see what we can do. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys' participation in previous version. Bring your questions. Any questions betwixt now and then, send to vns@runestone.org. Alan, I appreciate you in so many ways. Thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom with everyone this evening.
It's my honor. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Until next time, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps. Good night.
You were rising up from winter's dark with the flame we kept so dear. Our gods and ancestors preserved us, now the dawn is near. Light the fires, won't you raise the horn? Bless the seed, bless the soul. Hungry as we are for food and company, bring the meat and the wheels turn. The time has come for playing open deed. Dance, dance, source, jump, jump.